did you know that there are underwater cables in the Strait of Hormuz? So damage to them could affect key tech in the Middle East. Let's go to Chris McGuire on this, Senior Fellow for Emerging Technologies at the U.S. think tank Council on Foreign Relations. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
How extensive is the underwater system? How vulnerable is it?
Yeah, so I think the risk of digital disruption in the Middle East is real, but it is pretty regional right now. You have data centers in the Middle East that are being struck, but the region is very dependent on submarine cables writ large that largely do run through the Strait of Hormuz. The data centers and cables are vulnerable, but they really are mostly serving the Gulf markets and not the global markets right now. Obviously, there are large-scale data center build-outs that are planned for the Middle East, and that would fundamentally change the picture if those were to go forward. Most of the submarine traffic that is serving the global markets runs through the Red Sea. And if you were to see a circumstance where both the Red Sea and the Strait of Hormuz cables were to be impacted simultaneously, you would see pretty catastrophic global disruption. That's probably not the most likely risk right now, but it's something that can't be ignored given the kind of extent of the conflicts.
Okay, so would it be drone attacks then that pose the biggest threat?
Yeah, I think that drone attacks on the data centers themselves are probably a more direct threat than the subsea attacks happening. But that said, I think that subsea attacks on the Strait of Hormuz can't be ignored. There is some redundancy there. There are some landing sites that are outside of the direct strait. So if those cables in the strait were to be cut, there might be ways to still funnel data both to the Gulf and to Iran. But the really interesting development here, too, is the physical attacks on the data centers themselves and the fact that these data centers are now clearly seen as military targets. Not only do you have two in the UAE that were struck, but also one in Kuwait. And the Iranian regime has actually specifically said that they are targeting these data centers as military targets, which is a new development, that commercial telecommunications and AI and data infrastructure is now seen as military targets. So I think that is going to both significantly impact how the conflict goes forward, but also probably post-conflict. Think about how investors are going to evaluate the risk profile of kind of large-scale digital investments in the Middle East and elsewhere in any other geopolitically volatile regions, and really kind of drive demand for redundancy associated with any of those investments.
Yeah, we'll talk about the major investments some of those countries are making in that technology in a moment. I want to talk about the underwater cables for a moment. Have they ever been damaged before?
Not the Strait of Hormuz ones, but there was a significant incident in 2024 in the Red Sea where it was actually accidental damage, where it was the anchor from a damaged boat that moved across the cables and cut a number of them. That was a very significant incident. There's 17 submarine cables that transit the Red Sea. They carry the vast majority of all data between Europe and Asia. If all of those were to be cut, that is a critical vulnerability. And the most likely way that those would be cut, and I think this applies to in the Strait of Hormuz as well, is via an accident, not necessarily a direct kind of purposeful attack, although that's certainly possible and something we have to guard against, but just a damaged vessel that is dragging an anchor that can move through and cut the cables. So even if there's all the efforts in the world to protect the cables, these are still really critical choke points that are very hard to fully protect, especially given their kind of economic and strategic and technological value.
Let me ask you a technical question you may not know. How deeply are they buried?
I wouldn't profess to be that degree of an expert, but they're not necessarily easy to touch, but there's something that either a determined nation state can certainly touch. That there's a variety of countries that are developing the capability to actively target this infrastructure, but also just the fact that dragging anchors across the bottom of the ocean shows that many of these are just laid on the ocean floor, and there's significant vulnerabilities there. Like this is a hard thing to physically harden, and it's something that I think we need to have the ability to rapidly repair, and also just have global redundancy in network. That means increased terrestrial cable capacity, probably satellite backups, things that really aren't in place now, especially in the Middle East, where there is not an overland cable that connects the Gulf to either Europe or Asia, because that would have to go through Iraq or Iran Iran or Syria, none of which are destinations people wanted to build through. The Saudis are trying to build a cable through either Israel or Syria now, but that's not complete. So I think having some kind of redundancy there that's overland is critical, but it doesn't exist right now.
Okay, I do want to get you quickly on the data centers. You mentioned some have been struck by drones, which we understand. I don't know how far along some of these countries in the Middle East are in their build out of data centers. We know they're investing a lot of money and that some North American companies are involved in the build out. How would you say they've been affected? Has there been what you would call a major setback at this point with the drones that have hit the data centers?
So the data centers that have been impacted have been mostly kind of commercial generic cloud data centers. There has been some impact on the ground. I know that AWS has advised companies to move away from the Middle East, move their services away from there, just to kind of hedge against risk. But it's not as if this entire infrastructure there is crumbling. The big question is just as the really big build outs are being built, and none of these are online yet, but the really big AI data centers that will contain tens of billions, maybe even hundreds of billions of dollars worth of AI chips. What is the geostrategic and geopolitical risk associated with having those there? I think the U.S. has thought many countries have thought for a long time about the risk of dependence on Middle Eastern oil, and obviously have developed very significant resiliency campaigns and broadly have tried to diversify away from that, but also kind of work with good partners in the Middle East who are producing that. But the question, I don't think we have as many plans on kind of Middle Eastern data centers or Middle Eastern AI. And if there are going to be large scale data centers build outs in the Middle East, and it is going to be a geopolitically volatile region like we see now, then we have to protect those more, both from physical attacks, cybersecurity attacks, or cyber attacks, and kind of the other litany of causes that could cause these to go offline, because this is becoming the most important and valuable infrastructure in the world, and we have to prioritize it accordingly.
Chris McGuire, good to have you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks a lot.